So you're thinking about a career change. Something in metalwork, maybe?
It's more common than you might think.
Right. We got a message from a listener who's really intrigued by the whole plasma cutting machine operator thing.
Ah, interesting. There's a lot to unpack there.
You got that right. They sent over a bunch of excerpts from RoleCatcher, that career website.
I do, yeah, they've got some good resources.
Totally. So we're diving deep into those excerpts, a career guide, interview tips, all of it.
Great. Let's break it down then. What does the job actually look like day to day? What skills do you need to succeed? And how do you even land that interview?
Music to my ears. And RoleCatcher seems to be all about giving you those tools. But first things first, what is plasma cutting exactly? I love the analogy they use.
Oh, yeah, they have a good one in there.
Yeah, they talk about it like melting metal with this crazy intense heat and then basically blasting away that molten material with a jet of gas, resulting in this super clean cut.
Right, right. It's kind of like, I don't know if you've ever seen those time-lapse videos of like glaciers melting.
Oh, yeah.
It's kind of like that. The way that the intense heat from the sun can turn ice directly into a gas without it having to melt into water first.
Uh-huh.
That's kind of similar to what's happening with plasma cutting. You're creating a plasma state, only instead of the sun, we're using electricity to superheat the gas and give it that cutting power.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense. So instead of some clunky old saw, you've got this precise, almost futuristic torch.
You got it. It's not brute force, it's controlled energy, and that's how you get those clean, accurate cuts. On all sorts of metals, too, from steel to aluminum.
Which is what makes it so versatile. But the RoleCatcher guide, it does mention that the work environment, it's often noisy, potentially hazardous. What does that really mean for someone considering this job day in and day out?
Yeah, good point. It's not for everyone. Think about the sounds, the hiss of that plasma torch, metal clanging, machinery whirring, not exactly a quiet office job.
Right.
And you're working with extreme heat, obviously, and sometimes fumes, so safety gear is non-negotiable.
Yeah, definitely not optional.
No, it's ear protection, respirator mask, heavy-duty work boots, the whole 9 yards.
Right, because the guide also mentions standing for long periods, lifting heavy objects. It's physical.
It is. You need a certain level of fitness to handle it, no doubt about
Sure.
it. You're on your feet a lot, moving metal components, often in awkward positions. If someone has any doubts, any concerns at all, it's always best to talk to a doctor. Make sure your body can keep up.
Good point. It's not just about what you can lift once, it's day after day. But let's switch gears a bit and talk about the mental side of things. Because RoleCatcher lists some skills that are, well, not just about muscle.
Yeah, they highlight that it takes more than just knowing how to use the machine.
Right. So, they mention reading blueprints. What's so important about that?
It's essential. Imagine trying to assemble some complicated piece of furniture, but without the instructions. You'd be lost, right? A lot of extra parts and a lot of frustration.
Oh, tell me about it. I'm the queen of having extra parts after a so-called simple assembly.
Exactly. You're taking these technical drawings, these blueprints, and turning them into a physical thing. So you need spatial reasoning, an eye for detail, and the ability to spot anything that looks off before it becomes a big problem.
So it's like solving a puzzle, turning a 2D blueprint into a 3D object.
You got it. And then, on top of that, there's the whole troubleshooting thing, which RoleCatcher emphasizes. Machines break down, things go wrong. That's just the reality of the job.
What kind of things go wrong, though? Give us the inside scoop.
Oh, man, all sorts of things. A worn-out cutting tip, problems with that plasma arc, even software glitches if you're using one of the computer-controlled systems, which are more and more common these days.
Right, so you can't just be good with your hands. You got to be tech-savvy, too.
Exactly. A good understanding of how the machinery works, the materials you're using, the whole plasma cutting process, it's all connected. And this is where those blueprints we were talking about become even more important.
Because if you don't understand the plan...
You won't know if you've gone off course. Which brings us to another big thing, something that's impacting pretty much every job out there. Automation.
Oh, yeah, the robots are coming.
Well, maybe not robots exactly, but that automation element is here, and it changes how we have to think about job hunting.
How so?
It's not just about impressing the hiring manager anymore. Now your resume often has to get past an algorithm first.
Oh, man, that's kind of scary.
It can be, but the trick is understanding how those systems work. Algorithms love keywords, specific skills listed in a certain way. You need to know how to make your resume stand out, but in a way that still sounds human.
So it's like a whole other language you need to learn.
In a way. Tools like RoleCatcher, they offer AI-powered resume help, and that can be great, But it's not about blindly trusting a computer program. You need to understand WHY those things work so you can use them to your advantage.
It's like a partnership.
Exactly. And the good news is, those problem-solving skills you use on the job, they'll come in handy as the job market changes.
Love it when things connect like that. Which brings us to another thing RoleCatcher emphasizes, career progression. They talk about different levels, starting as an entry-level operator and moving up to senior-level positions. What does that look like in this field?
Well, you're not stuck in one spot forever, which is great. You might start as an assistant, shadowing a more experienced operator, getting comfortable with different types of machines, various metals, and the different quirks each one has. Then, as you gain experience, you get more and more responsibility.
Like what? Give me an example.
Well, eventually you'll be setting up the machines independently, handling those tricky problems we were talking about earlier, maybe even training newcomers.
So you can move up to leadership roles.
You can. You could end up supervising a whole team, tweaking processes to make them even better, maybe even working with engineers directly, figuring out how to optimize designs for plasma cutting.
That's awesome. There's real room to grow if you're willing to put in the effort.
Exactly. And that's connected to something else RoleCatcher mentions a lot, the importance of staying up to date on technology. This isn't a field where you just learn it once and you're good to go.
It's constantly evolving.
Constantly.
And speaking of challenges, let's talk about the interview process. Even with all the right skills, that can be nerve-wracking.
Absolutely.
Luckily, RoleCatcher to the rescue again. They have a whole section with potential interview questions. Have you seen that part?
Oh, yeah. They have tons of examples in there,
Yeah.
which is super helpful because you can get a feel for what those hiring managers are really looking for.
What's a good example of a question they highlight?
Let me see. Oh, this is a good one. How would you go about optimizing the plasma cutting process for maximum efficiency?
Ooh, good one. Because it's not just about knowing how to do it, but doing it well, doing it smart.
Exactly. What they're really looking for is that deeper understanding. So a good answer there would touch on adjusting the machine settings, things like amperage, the gas flow rate, that kind of thing. Maybe even mentioning different cutting techniques or strategies to like minimize waste and get the most out of your materials.
It's about showing them you're a thinker. You're not just pressing buttons, you're thinking about the whole process.
Exactly. But a really good answer would go even further.
Oh, how so?
You'd want to demonstrate that proactive problem-solving attitude that RoleCatcher talks so much about. So you could say something like, well, before I even start cutting, I'd analyze the job requirements, look at the type of material I'm working with, the thickness, and determine the absolute most efficient approach for that specific project. And then I'd keep a close eye on things throughout the process, making adjustments as needed.
So you're not just doing it the same way every time. You're adapting, thinking on your feet.
Right. And that shows them you're not just an operator, you're a problem solver.
Love that. It really does sound like this job is a blend of brains and brawn. But before we move on to the next part of our deep dive, where we're going to talk about the surprisingly creative side of this field, I do want to pause here and emphasize something really important for our listeners.
What's that?
All this information, as great as it is, it's just one piece of the puzzle.
For sure. It's important to do your own research, too.
Right. Talk to people actually doing the job, visit some workshops if you can, and figure out if this is the right fit for you.
Couldn't agree more. You know, it's funny how we tend to think about skilled trades as, well, mainly about the skills part.
Right, like it's all about physical work.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But as we've been talking about with this whole plasma cutting machine operator thing, there's a lot more going on upstairs, too.
100%. We've touched on the technical stuff, the problem solving, that constant need to keep up with technology. But there's this other layer that RoleCatcher hints at that I find super interesting.
Oh, yeah.
The collaborative side of it. The guide mentions that plasma cutting machine operators often work as part of a bigger team, interacting with other departments, supervisors, sometimes even clients.
Oh, for sure. You're not just off in a corner doing your own thing.
Not at all. So how important are those people skills, those soft skills, in a job like this?
They're essential. Think about it. You're taking those technical drawings, those blueprints, and turning them into something real, something tangible. But you're often coordinating with welders, machinists, engineers, anyone who's involved in making that final product.
So it's like you're a link in a chain.
Exactly. And if your piece doesn't fit right, the whole thing falls apart. Imagine you're working on some big, complicated project, and you're cutting this crucial piece that needs to be welded to another part.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
Even a tiny miscalculation, or if you didn't quite understand the specs, could throw off the entire project.
Talk about a headache for everyone.
No kidding. That's why being able to communicate clearly is so important. You might need to double-check those design details with the engineers, talk shop with the welders about the best way to weld your piece, maybe even let the production manager know if there are any holdups.
So you're not just a master of the plasma torch, you're a master communicator too.
You got it. And that's where those soft skills come in, that ability to get your point across, really listen to feedback, and work together to find solutions even when things get a little tense.
Which, let's be real, happens in every job sometimes.
Oh, absolutely. But those skills become even more important when you're dealing directly with clients, which RoleCatcher mentions does come up in this line of work.
Because then you're not just dealing with colleagues who understand the technical stuff.
Exactly. Imagine having to explain a complicated design change to a client who doesn't speak plasma cutting.
Right. They just want to know their project is in good hands.
Exactly. You need to be patient, explain things clearly, and build that trust so they know you're on top of it.
So it's about translating those technical details into plain English, managing expectations, and building those relationships.
You got it. And honestly, those skills, that ability to talk to people effectively, that's huge for the interview process too. Especially with those behavioral questions that RoleCatcher says are so common these days.
Oh, those. Tell me about a time when questions. Those can be tough.
They can be, but they're a chance to show off those soft skills that might not be obvious on your resume.
So how do you handle them? RoleCatcher gives that example. Describe a time when you had to work with a difficult colleague to achieve a common goal. That feels pretty universal.
It is. And the key is to pick a relevant example and structure your answer in a way that highlights those specific skills they're looking for.
So not just that time you got in an argument with Steve from accounting about the coffee machine.
Probably not the best choice. Think about a situation where there was a real challenge, ideally something related to teamwork, communication, maybe problem solving. Like maybe you had a colleague with a totally different work style, or you had to figure out how to meet a tight deadline when things weren't going to plan.
Okay, so pick a specific scenario, then what?
Then talk about what you did to address the situation. Did you try to see things from your colleague's perspective? Did you suggest a compromise or find a way to bridge that communication gap? The key is to show them that you can adapt, you can communicate clearly, and you can find solutions, even when it's tough.
So it's not about being right or wrong. It's about showing them you can handle those interpersonal dynamics professionally.
Exactly. And end on a positive note. What was the outcome? Did you manage to pull it off despite the challenges? Did you learn something valuable from the experience? Employers eat that stuff up.
It shows you're self-aware and always trying to grow.
Exactly. But let's not forget, while those people skills are super important, they're only one part of the equation.
Of course. We don't want to downplay the technical side of things, but there's something else that RoleCatcher mentions that I think gets overlooked a lot in these conversations about skilled trades. And it kind of ties back to that collaboration and client communication we were just talking about.
I'm intrigued. What is it?
The creative aspect.
You mean like artistic welding? Like those cool metal sculptures you see at art fairs and stuff?
That's part of it, but I'm thinking even broader. When you really think about it, you're taking raw materials and transforming them into something real, something functional, something that requires a ton of precision, and yeah, even a kind of artistry.
I've never thought about it quite like that.
Right. You're like a sculptor, but instead of clay, you're working with superheated, electrically charged gas.
That's a cool way to look at it. And I guess just like with sculpting, there's room for individual expression, you know? You can find your own way to solve a problem or put your own stamp on your work.
That's what I'm talking about. And RoleCatcher, they talk about how important precision and attention to detail are in this field, consistently meeting those high standards. That's more than just following instructions. It's taking pride in your craft.
And when you genuinely care about the quality of your work, it shows.
100%. And that can lead to greater job satisfaction, a sense of accomplishment, maybe even more opportunities down the road.
Absolutely. It's a different kind of reward than you get from sitting behind a desk all day. There's just something so satisfying about seeing a project through from start to finish, taking those raw materials and turning them into something tangible.
And that feeling, that sense of, I made this, you can't get that from just pushing buttons on a computer. It's a human thing. But on a practical level, let's talk about job security. Is this a field with a future? What's the job outlook like for plasma cutting machine operators?
That's the million-dollar question. But the good news is, according to RoleCatcher, things are looking pretty good. They're saying there's a growing demand for skilled tradespeople in general, and plasma cutting is no exception because it's so versatile.
So it's not just a fad.
Nope, not at all. Part of it is those experienced workers retiring, the old guard moving on.
Right, leaving some big shoes to fill.
Exactly. But it's more than that. The whole manufacturing industry is changing, adopting new technologies all the time, becoming more specialized, and all that means they need skilled operators who can keep up.
It's not your grandfather's factory anymore.
Right. Think aerospace, automotive, renewable energy. They all need precision manufacturing.
And that's where plasma cutting comes in.
And where skilled operators are in high demand, especially those who can troubleshoot, learn new things quickly, and, yeah, even talk to people.
It's all connected. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground here, from the importance of those soft skills and communicating with your team and clients, to that surprisingly creative side of the job, and even the job outlook for the future. But we're not done with our deep dive just yet.
What else does RoleCatcher have up its sleeve?
When we come back, we're digging into something that can really give you an edge in your career. Professional certifications. Don't go anywhere.
And we're back for the final part of our deep dive into the world of plasma cutting machine operators. Remember where we left off? We talked about the skills, the demands, the surprisingly creative side of this career path.
Right. Right. But there's one more thing RoleCatcher brings up, something that can really make a difference when you're trying to stand out in the job market.
And it's something that a lot of people don't think about, especially when it comes to skilled trades.
Yeah, people underestimate it, but those professional certifications, they can be huge.
They're a game changer. Think about it. You can say, I know how to do this, or you can say, I'm certified to do this, and here's the proof. Which one sounds more impressive?
It's a no-brainer. Right. It shows you're serious about your craft, you've gone the extra mile. And RoleCatcher, they get into some specific certifications that are especially valuable in this field.
Yeah, some of them might even surprise you. They might seem a little unexpected at first, but then when you think about what a plasma cutting machine operator actually does, it totally makes sense.
It all clicks into place. So let's start with one that RoleCatcher seems to emphasize a lot. Welding certifications. Now, hold on a second. Isn't welding like a whole other thing?
It is. It's its own separate trade. But here's the thing. A lot of times, those metal fabrication jobs, they involve multiple processes.
So it's not just cutting, it's welding too.
Often, yeah. So even if the job description doesn't specifically say must know how to weld, having that certification on your resume, it shows you've got that broader understanding of how things work in the real world.
You're adaptable, you're eager to learn new things. Those are all good things.
Exactly. Makes you a more well-rounded candidate.
Yeah.
And employers love that. Another one they highlight is CNC machine operation.
Now, for those of us who are like, what's CNC? I'm raising my hand here. It stands for Computer Numerical Control.
Right. And these CNC machines, they're everywhere in fabrication these days because they can handle those really complex cuts with crazy precision. It's all automated, programmed in.
So even if you're a rock star with a handheld plasma torch, knowing your way around a CNC machine, that gives you a serious edge.
Huge edge. Shows you're not intimidated by technology, you're embracing it. And remember all that stuff we talked about before, the analytical skills, problem solving, being able to spot errors.
Totally.
That translates directly to those CNC machines.
It's like all the pieces of the puzzle fitting together. Okay, so we've got welding, CNC, what else? Oh, this one's big, and RoleCatcher doesn't shy away from it. Safety certifications, especially OSHA.
Yeah, OSHA, that's the Occupational Safety and Health Administration.
Yeah.
They set those workplace safety standards, and let's be real, in a field like plasma cutting, safety is non-negotiable.
It's not an office job, that's for sure.
No kidding. You're dealing with some serious heat, heavy machinery, sometimes even hazardous materials. You can't mess around.
It can be dangerous if you don't know what you're doing.
Exactly. And that's where those OSHA certifications come in. It shows employers that you understand the risks, you know how to stay safe, and you're going to make sure everyone else is working safely too.
It's peace of mind for them. Okay, so we've got welding, CNC, OSHA. Anything else? I feel like we're just scratching the surface here.
Well, one more that RoleCatcher mentions, and this one might seem obvious when you think about it, but a lot of people forget about it. Getting certified in blueprint reading or technical drawing interpretation.
Because those blueprints, those are essential. Like we said before, you got to be able to decode those things.
Absolutely. And having a certification proves you can do more than just read them. You understand the nuances. You can spot potential issues, maybe even suggest design improvements. That's next level.
It's like you're not just following orders, you're thinking critically about the whole process. That's got to impress a potential employer. Okay, so let's say someone's listening to this and they're like, all right, I'm sold. These certifications sound awesome. How do I get started? What's RoleCatcher's advice on that?
They've got some good tips. They say check out your local community colleges, vocational schools, maybe even some of those trade associations offer training programs.
Yeah, there are often more options than you realize.
Exactly. And a lot of those programs are designed specifically to help you prep for those certifications. So do your research, see what works for your schedule, your budget. Don't be afraid to ask questions.
Reach out to people in the field, find out what worked for them, which programs they recommend.
It's all about gathering that intel.
Exactly, because sometimes it's not just what you know, it's WHO, you know?
Yeah.
Building those connections can be huge.
Okay, wow, we have covered so much ground in this deep dive. From those technical skills to the importance of teamwork and being able to communicate effectively to the surprisingly creative side of plasma cutting.
And the job outlook, don't forget about that. Oh, right, it's a field with a future.
Definitely.
But remember, everyone, this is just the starting point. We've given you the info, the insights, but the real work begins when you step into that workshop, fire up that plasma torch, and start putting it all into action.
That's where the magic happens.
Exactly. And we hope that this deep dive has inspired you to explore those options, to embrace those challenges, because honestly, this is a career path that can be incredibly rewarding.
It's not just a job, it's a craft.
Oh, well said. We'll be back next week with a deep dive into a whole new topic, but until then, keep learning, keep growing, and as always, thanks for joining us.